Have you ever stopped to think about the tomato? It sits quietly in your kitchen almost every single day. You slice it into sandwiches without thinking. You stir it into pasta sauce. You spread it across pizza. You mix it into soup. Sometimes it is the first ingredient you reach for. It feels ordinary, almost too ordinary. But what if I told you that for hundreds of years, many people believed this same fruit could kill them? Not upset their stomach, not make them sick, kill them. Doctors warned people to stay away from it. Gardeners admired it but refused to taste it. Some families would rather starve than put it on the dinner table. It sounds unbelievable today, doesn't it? Yet history is full of stories like this. Sometimes the foods we love most were once the foods we feared the most. And perhaps no food has traveled a stranger road than the tomato. Its journey began thousands of years ago on lonely mountain slopes. It survived wars, crossed oceans, confused scientists, frightened kings, and eventually found its way onto the most famous food in the world. But that ending was never guaranteed. There was a time when the tomato could have disappeared forever. Today, I want to take you back to where everything began. Not in Italy, not in Spain, not even in Mexico, much farther south, high above the clouds, along the western edge of South America stretches one of the longest mountain ranges on Earth, the Andes. These mountains rise so high that some peaks remain covered in snow all year, while their lower slopes are warm enough to grow an astonishing variety of plants. Thousands of years ago, among rocky hillsides and dry valleys, tiny wild tomato plants grew almost unnoticed. If you had seen one back then, you probably would have walked right past it. The fruits were tiny. Many were no larger than a pea. Others were about the size of a marble. They were not the bright red tomatoes we recognize today. Some were yellow, some were orange, some were green even when ripe. Many were sour, some were slightly bitter. And compared to modern tomatoes, they contained very little flesh, mostly seeds. To us, they would hardly seem worth eating. But nature was quietly experimenting. Generation after generation, century after century, the tomato family slowly adapted to changing climates. Birds carried seeds across valleys. Animals spread them farther north. Rain washed them downhill. Wind carried pollen between plants. Long before people began farming them, tomatoes had already started a remarkable journey. Scientists believe these wild ancestors first appeared somewhere in what is now Peru and Ecuador. From there, they slowly expanded northward. This was no quick migration. It took hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. Plants move very differently from people. Their journeys are measured in centuries. Eventually, these little fruits reach Central America, then southern Mexico. And there, something extraordinary happened. People noticed them. The ancient civilizations of Mesoamerica were among the greatest farmers the world has ever known. They understood seeds, they understood selection. Without laboratories, without microscopes, without genetics, they somehow discovered one of agriculture's greatest secrets. If you save seeds only from the best plants, the next generation slowly becomes better. Larger fruit, sweeter taste, better harvests, year after year, generation after generation. This simple idea transformed countless crops: corn, beans, squash, peppers, and eventually, tomatoes. Little by little, the tiny wild fruits became larger. Their skins became smoother, their flesh became thicker, their flavors became richer. By the time great cities began rising across ancient Mexico, tomatoes had become an important food. The Aztecs called them tomatal. That single word has survived for hundreds of years. It crossed languages, it crossed continents, it crossed oceans. Today, almost every language on Earth still carries some version of that ancient name. Tomato, tomate, pomodoro, tomate, tomate. Tomatal never truly disappeared. I always find that remarkable. Sometimes words live longer than kingdoms. The Aztecs used tomatoes in ways that would feel surprisingly familiar today. They crushed them with chili peppers, mixed them with herbs, combined them with beans, added them to stews, served them alongside roasted meats. What we now call salsa has ancient roots stretching back hundreds of years before Europeans ever saw the Americas. Imagine walking through one of the great marketplaces of Tenochtitlan. thousands of merchants calling out to customers, fresh vegetables stacked in woven baskets, colorful peppers, corn, beans, chocolate, avocados, and piles of tomatoes in every shade imaginable. To the Aztecs, tomatoes were not unusual. They were simply another gift from the earth. Everyday food, reliable food, good food. No one feared them. No one questioned whether they were safe. No one imagined they would one day become one of history's most controversial fruits. Then everything changed. In 1519, Spanish ships appeared along the coast of Mexico. Led by Hernán Cortés, they entered a world unlike anything Europe had ever seen. The meeting between these civilizations would change history forever. It also brought unimaginable tragedy. Empires collapsed, cities burned, entire cultures were devastated by disease and conquest. Countless lives were lost. Among the enormous treasures carried back across the Atlantic were gold, silver, cocoa, vanilla, peppers, and small bags filled with unfamiliar seeds. Most Europeans paid little attention to them. After all, compared to mountains of silver, who cared about tiny seeds? Yet history often hides its greatest treasures inside the smallest packages. Somewhere aboard one of those ships, tomato seeds crossed the Atlantic Ocean for the first time. No one on board could have imagined what they carried. Those tiny seeds would eventually reshape the cuisines of entire continents. But first, Europe had to meet the tomato, and Europe was not impressed. The earliest tomatoes grown in Spain and Italy looked very different from modern supermarket varieties. Many were yellow. In fact, Italian gardeners admired their golden color so much that they gave them a beautiful name, pomodoro, golden apple. Even today, Italians still call tomatoes pomodoro, golden apple. The name survived long after most tomatoes became red. At first, wealthy collectors grew tomatoes simply because they looked exotic. European gardens during the Renaissance were places of curiosity. Explorers constantly returned with strange plants from distant lands. Tulips, sunflowers, potatoes, peppers, tomatoes. Owning unusual plants became a symbol of wealth. Visitors admired them, gardeners discussed them, artists painted them, botanists studied them. But eating them? That was another matter entirely. You see, Europeans immediately noticed something unsettling. The tomato plant looked suspiciously familiar. Its leaves, its flowers, its smell, everything reminded them of another group of plants they already knew very well, the nightshade family. This family included some of Europe's most feared plants: deadly nightshade, mandrake, henbane, plants associated with poison, magic, witchcraft, hallucinations, death. For centuries, people had learned to avoid these dangerous relatives. Now along came another strange newcomer that looked almost identical. Would you trust it? Most people didn't. The tomato quickly earned a reputation as something mysterious. Its vines smelled strong. Its leaves were sticky. Its fruit appeared almost too bright. Some believed beautiful colors were nature's warning signs. Others argued that anything related to deadly nightshade must surely be poisonous as well. The idea spread remarkably fast. Soon, many gardeners grew tomatoes only for decoration. They admired the colorful fruits hanging from green vines. Children were warned not to taste them. Guests admired them from a distance. Nobody wanted to become the first victim. Fear has a curious way of spreading. One person repeats a rumor, another adds a small detail, a third swears they heard it from someone trustworthy. Before long, nobody remembers where the story began, only that everyone believes it. The tomato became trapped inside exactly this kind of fear. No one had convincing evidence it was poisonous, but no one wanted to test the theory either. Imagine setting a bowl of unfamiliar fruit onto your family table. Someone whispers it belongs to the same family as deadly poison. Would you take the first bite? Most people wouldn't. So the tomato waited, year after year, garden after garden, growing beautifully, ignored at dinner. It is strange how often history works this way. Sometimes the hardest obstacle is not disease, or drought, or war. Sometimes it is simply changing people's minds. The tomato could survive harsh weather. It could survive long voyages across oceans. It could grow in poor soil. But convincing frightened people to eat it? That proved much harder. Still, not everyone remained afraid forever. In southern Europe, especially around Naples, cooks were naturally curious. Unlike nobles, ordinary working families could not afford to waste food that grew well. If something survived in their gardens, They experimented. Very cautiously at first. A small taste, then another. Someone discovered tomatoes tasted wonderful when roasted. Another found they blended beautifully with onions. Others mixed them with olive oil and herbs. Bit by bit, the tomato began slipping into kitchens. Quietly, almost secretly. Not as the center of the meal, not yet. Just a small addition, a little color, a little acidity, a little freshness. No one realized they were witnessing the beginning of a culinary revolution. One recipe, one family, one village at a time. The tomato was slowly earning trust, not through arguments, not through science, simply through experience. People who actually ate tomatoes kept surviving. Then they kept asking for more. History often changes this way, not through dramatic speeches, but through ordinary dinners. A grandmother sharing a recipe, a farmer trying something different, a neighbor tasting it and smiling. Tiny moments, repeated thousands of times. Eventually, those tiny moments become tradition, and traditions become culture. By the end of the 17th century, southern Italy was beginning to fall in love with a fruit that much of Europe still distrusted. They had no idea this humble newcomer would someday become the heart of their national cuisine. Nor did they realize another invention was quietly waiting just around the corner. A simple flatbread, fresh mozzarella, a handful of basil, and a tomato sauce unlike anything the world had ever tasted. But before pizza could conquer the world, the tomato still had one final enemy to defeat: its reputation. And that battle would prove even more dramatic than anyone expected, because soon, thousands of people would gather in public simply to watch one man eat a tomato. They believed they were about to witness his death. Instead, they witnessed history. If you've enjoyed traveling through this remarkable story so far, I'd love to know something. What surprised you most? Was it the tiny wild tomatoes growing high in the Andes, or the fact that people admired tomatoes for centuries without daring to eat them? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I always enjoy reading what fascinates you most. For nearly 200 years, the tomato lived a strange double life. In gardens, it was admired. On dinner tables, it was avoided. People watered it, they pruned it, they proudly showed it to visitors. But when supper arrived, the tomatoes stayed outside. Fear is a powerful thing. Once an idea settles into people's minds, it can survive for generations. Parents warned their children, neighbors repeated old stories, doctors offered cautious advice, and before long, almost everyone accepted the same conclusion. The tomato was simply not worth the risk. Yet history has a habit of changing quietly, not through kings, not through battles, but through ordinary people willing to try something different. That is exactly what happened in southern Italy. Unlike the wealthy families of northern Europe, the people living around Naples had little choice but to use every crop their land produced. The rich could afford expensive spices imported from Asia. The poor could not. The rich served elaborate banquets. The poor relied on simple vegetables grown only a few steps from their homes. Fortunately for them, tomatoes loved the warm Mediterranean climate. The volcanic soil surrounding Mount Vesuvius was unlike almost anywhere else in Europe. Every eruption over thousands of years had filled the ground with minerals. The soil became incredibly fertile. Tomato vines flourished there. Summer after summer, they produced heavy clusters of bright fruit. The harvest became too large to ignore. At first, families experimented carefully. Some roasted tomatoes over open fires until their skins blistered. Others removed the skins and cooked the flesh with olive oil. A few added garlic. Some mixed in onions. Others sprinkled herbs gathered from nearby hillsides. Each family discovered its own little improvements. One recipe became 2 became 20 became hundreds. Slowly, almost without anyone noticing, the tomato stopped being a curiosity. It became an ingredient. This transformation was helped by one remarkable man. His name was Antonio Latini. His story is almost as extraordinary as the tomato itself. Antonio did not come from privilege. As a child, he lost both of his parents. Some historians believe plague took them. Others believe famine. Whatever the cause, Antonio suddenly found himself alone. He survived however he could. Like many poor children of the 17th century, he searched for food wherever he could find it. Eventually, he found work in kitchens. At first, he performed the smallest tasks imaginable: sweeping floors, carrying water, cleaning pots, preparing vegetables, watching experienced cooks from a distance. But Antonio possessed something that cannot be taught: curiosity. He watched everything. He remembered everything. Every spice, every technique, every recipe. Years passed, his skills improved, his reputation grew. Eventually, he rose to become steward for the Spanish viceroy of Naples. From orphan to one of the highest culinary positions in southern Italy, it is an extraordinary journey. In 1692, Antonio published an enormous cookbook. Inside its pages appeared something historians still celebrate today: one of Europe's earliest written tomato sauce recipes. Imagine opening that book. Most recipes still reflected medieval traditions: rich meats, complex sauces, exotic spices. Then suddenly, a recipe centered around tomatoes. Antonio instructed cooks to roast ripe tomatoes over hot embers. Once softened, the skins could be removed easily. The flesh was chopped finely, mixed with onions, fresh herbs, olive oil, salt, a little vinegar, sometimes chili peppers. The finished sauce was served alongside boiled meat. Not pasta, not pizza. Those combinations would come later. But the important step had already happened. Someone had written down tomato sauce. Writing matters. A spoken recipe can disappear in a single generation. A written recipe can survive for centuries. Antonio unknowingly preserved the beginning of a culinary revolution. Soon, other cooks began experimenting. Every region made small adjustments. Some preferred sweeter tomatoes, others added basil. Some included black pepper, others relied only on garlic. Each version slowly evolved. No single person invented modern tomato sauce. It grew naturally, like the tomato itself, one small improvement at a time. Meanwhile, another quiet revolution was taking place. Pasta had already existed in Italy for hundreds of years. Contrary to popular belief, Marco Polo did not introduce it from China. People across Italy had been making various forms of pasta long before his famous journey. But there was one problem. Pasta often lacked excitement. It was usually served with butter, cheese, or simple broths, perfectly satisfying, yet somewhat plain. The tomato changed everything. Its natural acidity balanced rich cheeses. Its sweetness complemented wheat. Its bright color transformed an otherwise simple meal into something unforgettable. During the 18th century, more and more Italian cooks began pairing pasta with tomato sauces. Nobody realized they were creating dishes that millions of people would someday consider timeless. Sometimes history hides inside everyday meals. No newspapers announced the invention. No crowd celebrated. Families simply cooked dinner. Generation after generation, recipe after recipe. Until one day those recipes became tradition. As tomatoes became more common in southern Italy, northern Europe remained skeptical. Many wealthy families still believed the fruit was dangerous. Part of this fear came from unfortunate coincidence. During elegant dinners, wealthy Europeans often used pewter plates. These shiny gray plates contained significant amounts of lead. Tomatoes are naturally acidic. When acidic foods remained in contact with lead, tiny amounts of the metal dissolved into the food. People became sick. They blamed the tomato, not the plate. Today we understand what actually happened. Back then, nobody knew. Science had not yet uncovered the dangers of lead poisoning. From their perspective, the evidence seemed obvious. People ate tomatoes. Later they became ill. The conclusion appeared simple. The tomato must be poisonous. Ironically, poorer families eating from wooden bowls or simple clay dishes rarely experienced the same problem. Many of them consumed tomatoes without difficulty, but their experiences carried less influence than wealthy households. Sometimes the opinions of the powerful spread farther than the experiences of ordinary people, even when the ordinary people are right. Gradually, however, evidence became impossible to ignore. Entire villages ate tomatoes regularly. Nothing happened. Children grew healthy. Farmers remained strong. Families lived long lives. The supposed poison seemed remarkably harmless. Little by little, fear weakened. By the late 18th century, tomatoes had become firmly established across southern Italy. Then came one of history's most famous foods, pizza. Today, we often imagine pizza as an ancient Italian tradition stretching back thousands of years. The truth is more interesting. Flatbreads have existed for thousands of years. Ancient Egyptians baked them, Romans baked them, Greeks baked them. But the pizza we recognize today was born in Naples. Originally, it was food for workers. Quick, cheap, filling. Street vendors sold warm flatbreads topped with whatever ingredients were available. Sometimes garlic, sometimes cheese, sometimes anchovies, eventually, tomatoes. The combination was magical. The bread absorbed the rich tomato juices. The tomatoes became sweeter during baking. Fresh cheese melted across the surface. Simple ingredients created extraordinary flavor. It was never intended to impress kings. It existed simply to satisfy hungry workers. Perhaps that is why it became so successful. Great food often begins among ordinary people. Then came the story almost everyone has heard. Whether every detail is true remains uncertain. But like many legends, it contains a deeper truth. In 1889, King Umberto I and Queen Margherita visited Naples. According to tradition, Queen Margherita wished to taste the local food rather than the elaborate French cuisine served in royal palaces. A famous pizza maker named Raffaele Esposito prepared 3 pizzas. One contained tomatoes, fresh mozzarella, green basil leaves. The colors matched the Italian flag: red, white, green. The Queen supposedly loved it. Esposito named the pizza in her honor, Pizza Margherita. Modern historians debate whether this event happened exactly as described. Some documents appear suspicious. Others suggest similar pizzas already existed years earlier. Yet regardless of the legend's accuracy, one fact remains undeniable. By the end of the 19th century, tomato pizza had become one of Naples' defining foods. Immigrants carried those recipes around the world. Soon, New York, Chicago, Buenos Aires, Melbourne, Sao Paulo, everywhere Italians settled, pizza followed. And wherever pizza traveled, the tomato traveled with it. Still, one major country remained unconvinced: the United States. For much of the 18th century, Americans inherited Europe's suspicion of tomatoes. Gardeners admired them. Cookbooks rarely included them. Many people still referred to them as love apples. Some believed eating them caused illness. Others simply considered them strange. Even Thomas Jefferson grew tomatoes at Monticello. Visitors considered him somewhat unusual for actually eating them. Old fears disappear slowly. Then came one of the most famous stories in American food history. Whether every detail happened exactly this way remains uncertain, but the legend itself reveals how people felt about tomatoes. The year was 1820. The place was Salem, New Jersey. A respected local man named Colonel Robert Gibbon Johnson reportedly decided he had heard enough foolish rumors. According to tradition, he announced that he would publicly eat tomatoes outside the courthouse. Word spread quickly. Crowds gathered. Some accounts claim nearly 2,000 people attended. Many expected tragedy. Some believed the colonel would collapse within minutes. Others reportedly brought doctors. Still others came simply out of curiosity. Johnson climbed the courthouse steps carrying a basket filled with bright red tomatoes. He picked one up, held it high, then calmly took a bite. The crowd watched silently. Nothing happened. He took another bite. Still nothing. Then another. The colonel smiled, finished several tomatoes, remained perfectly healthy. According to the legend, the crowd erupted into applause. Whether the story happened exactly that way hardly matters. Historians have found little contemporary evidence supporting every dramatic detail. But Colonel Johnson certainly existed. He certainly promoted tomatoes. And the story reflects something historically true. America was slowly overcoming its fear. Sometimes legends survive because they capture emotional truth even when historical details become blurred. By the middle of the 19th century, tomatoes were appearing everywhere. Cookbooks featured them. Farmers planted larger fields. Markets filled with baskets of fresh fruit. Canning factories began preserving tomatoes for winter. What had once been feared was quickly becoming essential. It is remarkable how completely public opinion can reverse. One century calls something dangerous. The next century cannot imagine life without it. Perhaps every generation experiences something similar. We fear what we do not yet understand. Then familiarity slowly replaces fear. The tomato had nearly completed one of history's greatest transformations. From tiny wild fruit to Aztec staple, to European curiosity, to suspected poison, to beloved ingredient. Yet one final chapter remained. Oddly enough, it would unfold not in a kitchen, but inside the highest court in the United States. Judges wearing black robes would spend serious time debating an unexpected question. Was the tomato a fruit or a vegetable? The answer would affect international trade, scientific definitions, and even the language we still use today. And believe it or not, the debate has never completely disappeared. Before we continue into the final chapter, I'd love to hear from you. If you could taste only one tomato dish for the rest of your life, what would it be? Fresh tomato salad? Pasta? Pizza? Homemade soup? Or something completely different? Leave your answer in the comments. I always enjoy seeing how many different ways this remarkable fruit has become part of people's lives around the world. The tomato's journey is one of history's greatest transformations. Born as a tiny wild fruit in the Andes, it was cultivated by ancient civilizations in Mexico, feared as poison across Europe for centuries, and finally embraced by ordinary people who dared to taste it. Today, it grows on every inhabited continent and has become the heart of dishes like pizza, pasta, salsa, curries, and countless others. Its story reminds us that the unfamiliar is not always dangerous. Sometimes, the world's greatest treasures simply need time to be understood. Next time you enjoy a tomato, remember, you are tasting thousands of years of remarkable history.